Welcome to Deals with Heels, where female entrepreneurs thrive. I'm Deborah.
And I'm Christina.
Welcome to the show. We're your hosts.
We are. Welcome. Do you realize we only have 2 episodes left of the season?
I know.
And this is one of them. And I'm so excited.
Are you feeling super unstoppable?
Oh, yes. I mean, that was a great way. I mean, all year long, I truly have what can I do to take that next level up? And through this podcast as well, my life has really transformed this year in many different ways. It's been some ups and downs, but just having that vision of no matter good or bad, making it unstoppable, so exciting.
And we had such great guests that gave us so many good tips on self-improvement. And we have a great one.
Yes.
Today, too, who's actually from Oklahoma, but we have her virtually. She's not from the same town that we are from. And she is a life coach and a host of the podcast, Unleash Your Full Potential. Please welcome Kimberly Jarman to Deals with Heels.
Yeah.
I love that.
Ladies.
Unleash your full potential.
Yes.
That's what we're trying to do.
That's the name of my coaching program. And my podcast is Thrive and Align Healing with Dr. Carmen Jones.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry.
You're good. You're good.
All right. Tell us a little bit just about your story and we'll have her full bio in show notes, but if you would tell us a little bit about your story and how you started your coaching company and all of that entrepreneurial stuff, we would love to
How we got here.
Yeah, how we got here.
Yeah. I was like basically the majority of average Americans, right? I did what society told me to do. I went to college, and in college, my bachelor's degree was in counseling, and they were like, by the way, you can't do anything with that. You have to go to grad school. So I did what I was told, and I went to grad school, and I got my graduate degree in counseling. And I got married, and my ex-husband was a college football coach. So in the counseling world, LPCs don't transfer state to state. And as a college football coach's wife, we were going to move all the time. So I just went into higher ed, did the 8 to 5 thing because that's what I was supposed to do. And I hated it. I didn't know that it was the 8 to 5 situation that I hated. I thought it was like the work. Because essentially what I was doing was life coaching new college students, right? Like student athletes and veterans. But I hated being in an office, and I hated someone telling me what to do.
It's like singing. I just said in last week's episode, I've said it in multiple times, I don't like being told what to do. I mean, I really don't like it. I mean, there are some circumstances, very few.
Yeah.
I mean, I can usually navigate pretty well if the leadership is highly intelligent and highly competent, but that's not what happens in higher ed. We just promote people. So I came to a place in my life where I just was really unhappy. I just constantly like seeking like what I know I'm meant for more. I know I have more potential in this, but like what am I supposed to do? And not having like I'm confident. I've always been a confident woman, but not having like the self-belief to like believe in myself enough to like go after big dreams. And so my soul did me a hard favor and said, okay, we'll just burn your life down for you. So you have no other option other than to start over. So left my husband.
I feel you.
Yeah, left my husband.
Blew up too.
Yeah, left my husband, quit my job, moved states, back home to Oklahoma. And there's a whole other story in there. But when I came back, the goal was like, I'm going to pursue my dreams. I've supported this man for 9 years in his. I'm going to go after my dreams. I just didn't have enough confidence. So I went back into higher ed. And again, my soul was like, oh, you're not listening? All right.
Here, let us teach you this lesson again, Kimberly.
We're going to do it for you, sister. So I had been struggling most of my life. I struggled like everybody, I think, with like depression and anxiety. And I had gone to all the therapists. I had 6, and um, we had lost everything in a flood before I moved back. And so that took away any coping mechanisms that I had. And here I am landing back in Oklahoma, left my husband, quit my job, went back into higher ed. I'm struggling with PTSD at that point. And I ended up in the psych hospital for suicide. And when I got out, I realized two things. I was not as depressed as I thought I was, and no one was coming to save me. No human, no God. Like, if I wanted a different life, it was all on me. So I quit my job in higher ed very epically. My coworker, there was only two of us, and we had a lot of problems with my boss. And I looked at him and I was like, just leave. Like, you want to go into a new profession that's like has nothing to do with this, just leave. And he looked at me at 9:30 in the morning and said, okay, and started packing his box. And I was like, oh shit, like, I'm going to be left here by myself. So I packed
You're like,
my box and I typed up our letters of resignation and I took them to HR and we drove off at 10:30 in the morning. And I don't know at what point she figured out her only two employees had quit, but they did. And so my soul again burned it all down and was like, okay, now you can never go back into higher ed because that's not how you quit jobs appropriately. What are you going to do? You're single. You got to make money yourself. What are you going to do? And at that point, like, it was like, I'd already hit rock bottom. There was nowhere else to go, y'all. I had to go up. And I had one friend, she was an entrepreneur, and she told me, I really think you could become an entrepreneur. I think that you could open a yoga studio or own your own CrossFit gym. I really think that you have what it takes. And that was the dream, ladies, is to go open my own CrossFit gym. So I typed up an email to my CrossFit gym box owner that I was going to, and I was like, I got money and I'll partner with you. And he was like, no, I'll sell it to you. And I was like, okay. I knew nothing about being an entrepreneur. He handed me his books. I didn't know what I was looking at. I literally saw ink on the page with number dollar bill signs by it. And I was like, well, okay. All right. I guess this looks fine. Bought the gym, and that's how I started my entrepreneur journey. And I owned the CrossFit gym for a couple years. At that point, as an entrepreneur, I didn't have rejection resilience yet.
oh,
So
it's so hard.
yeah. So every time an athlete would quit, I felt like they were breaking up with me. So I was trying to learn how to be an entrepreneur and market and sell. I was already a damn good CrossFit coach. I didn't have the business skills yet, right? So I was trying to learn all those. I'd have somebody quit. I was breaking even and I felt like they were breaking up with me. And so I couldn't emotionally handle it. Sold the gym. And then from there, I was like, well, what am I going to do now? And I was just so tired of like living paycheck to paycheck. And I was reading a book, and the book basically said if you want to learn how to be successful, you got to get a coach. I was like, I don't know what that is, but okay. So I Google it. I find Brooke Castillo's podcast, The Life Coach School, listened to 2 episodes, and I joined and studied underneath her for 2 years. And I was like, this is it. This is what I have been called to do. Like, this is my destiny. This is my journey. And so then I launched my coaching business in October of 2020 and haven't looked back.
That's fantastic. Congratulations. I love that.
Yeah.
We too have been, me especially, thrust into life changes with tragedy because I was in functional freeze. I didn't know I was, but I actually could not make that decision. And so,
It's
well,
hard. I think
the
it,
party, right? Mine was around the same time as yours. So,
it's crazy of just pushing ourselves forward. So, um, I actually read You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero. We've talked about this. I think it's an awesome book. But tell me, because that's really the book that changed your life, correct? So
Yeah.
go into a little bit about how you connected that with your coaching.
Yeah, so in her book, You're Badass at Making Money, Jen talks a lot about like money and like how she hired her first coach, like how she was kind of stuck in these money mindsets, right? And kind of living in poverty. Um, And then she hires this coach that she spends like $75,000 on, right?
Ooh.
And I'm like, "Is that how much coaches are? Okay."
Is that how much
Um,
I'm gonna make?
yeah. And it just like she just kept hammering home in that book, like, if you wanna be successful, you have to have a coach, and like how her coach changed her life. And I was like, obviously I haven't figured it out for myself, so I'm gonna I'm gonna trust this woman. It worked for her. Like, I'm gonna go see what this is about. And when found Brooke's podcast, and she talks about the model in there, the CTFAR. So circumstances, they're neutral, they're not good or not bad. We have a thought about that circumstance. That thought creates emotions. Emotions drive our actions or inactions, and our actions create the results in our life. So if we want different results, we have to have a different thought. That was like mind blowing to me. Nowhere in my graduate program, no therapist I'd ever had ever told me that. It was like my thoughts are creating my emotions. And I was like, this is a secret to the universe. Like, this is literally how we create whatever we want in our life. Like, I have to share this with the world because this is life changing. And so I think that's really the catalyst that book led to, those steps to create my coaching business.
I really strive to have that too. And I was really inspired by Sadhguru, and he talks about not giving away your power and holding that to yourself, and don't give anyone the power to hurt you and to, as he says, freak you with his little accent, and it's pretty cute. But um holding on to that power and not giving it away and letting people affect you in those ways, was a really big deal for me and helping me into my journey and being able to separate,
Oh,
to
yeah.
not let somebody else's
What they're
opinions or what they thought, or if they were upset about something. Now I'm just, if what I do, wear, or say, or post online bothers you, then I think you should get counseling. Because, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm just a person, and in 30 minutes, you're not going to see me anymore for who
right.
knows how long. And you gave me the power to make you unhappy. Just
Yeah,
handed it over to me and
yeah,
let me affect it. And you know what? I didn't even realize you gave it to me. I walked away and didn't have a second thought about you.
no.
And that's
yeah,
how everyone is with us too. What is in our minds, all of our unhappiness and anxiety and sadness, it doesn't really exist. It's imaginary. It's produced in our mind. It's not something tangible.
yeah, for sure. You
That's,
know, I, so part of my coping mechanisms in my story when I was talking about the flood, right, was
mm-hmm,
religion. Religion was great for me when I needed it throughout my teen years, but I was also spiritually bypassing. So anything that has to do with like the woo world, like my brain automatically is like resistant to, right? But what I've learned about myself on this journey is my brain loves science. And so it loves neuroscience. And when we can like give me the data and the facts and explain things to me from like a data perspective, my brain will click on and be like, okay, I get it. So I had heard what you were saying, like power and stuff, but it all felt like this woo theory stuff until someone like explained to me like, no, you have a thought which the neurotransmitters are firing, right? We have this chemical reaction from this thought. That chemical reaction creates an energetic, like from physics, energy, right?
mm-hmm.
Which is an emotion. That's all it
Yes.
is we have these thoughts that create neurotransmitters firing, right? Creates a chemical reaction like
Mm-hmm.
dopamine, serotonin, right? That creates an emotion in the body. The energy in the body is either then processed out or it's stored. And for me, it was like, oh, I see how this all works now, right? And it's like I don't have to be this zen higher being that like can let go and not be unattached. I can really just take the science and understand like, oh, thoughts come from my prefrontal cortex, or thoughts come from my limbic brain, my primal brain, and like these parts of my brain, like why do they create thoughts? Like the survival part is all about the motivational triad: seeking pleasure, avoid pain and suffering, utilize as little energy as possible, right? And when I can learn the difference between the two, then I get to be the one that's running the show. I get to be the one that manages my brain and decides, is this factual, this thought? Is it bait? Can I prove it in a court of law? Or is this a story that my brain is creating, right, to keep me safe and keep me tucked away in the cave because that's where safety lies and energy is not required?
Right. I love because I'm a really big nerd. I love all of this science. And the thing that helped me with manifestation the most wasn't my spirituality, it was actually science.
Yeah.
And that seems weird, but it's the collider experiment with photons.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're observing it, the photons go through these two slots.
Mm-hmm. The observer effect.
Yes, and when
Yeah.
you look away, it scatters. And
Mm-hmm.
so for matter to change based on who's observing it, right? So my observation, my mental observation, my senses reaching out, all of that full body, mind, heart, soul observing can create whatever I need.
Mm-hmm.
That experiment just proved it. They were trying
Yeah.
to make them go in that. As soon as they started watching, they started doing it.
Yeah.
And so the nerd in me, that was like a connecting point with the nerd in me and my spirituality going, oh, I was already
Yeah.
into, but that was like a science explanation of how it works a little bit and proof that
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So why is it working harder is not always the answer? So, from that neuroscience, I really would love to hear your take on this because I believe it now. Like I know we don't have to work our asses off to get what we want. But I would love to hear it from an
I got
see,
that
I'm
straight off
more
of her website, so she's going to
yes.
have a good answer.
Because I am more from the spiritual side of knowing, just trusting in my higher self and knowing that I just put in the action. But I would
Mhm.
love to hear it because it's fascinating to hear it from the science point of view.
Yeah, so we think about, like, when we working harder, right? Like, what do you like, when we have that question, we have to go and identify, okay, what does working harder even look like in my life? What does it mean? And when we think about entrepreneurs, I think working harder means, like, a lot of grind, right? Like, a lot of putting a lot of hours in. We have that whole hustle culture, right? Um And when you really evaluate, like, what are the activities, I know for most entrepreneurs, not all, but what activities are we actually working on and doing? You start fleshing out, like, they're not big needle movers. They're just a lot of, like, busy work and, like, pardon my French, ego masturbation, right? It's like,
Right, the
I'm do
content that's just like, oh, it drives me crazy when they're trying to sell some that their content does. It's just it doesn't give anything. It doesn't have any meat to it that gives them something in return.
yeah, and we're, like, doing all this stuff and, like, posting all the time, right? And it's not intentional, actionable, needle moving activities. And where it comes from is this, like, graspy, needy, lack type mindset that drives that very hustly type energy, right? That makes us work harder all the time. So if we go back to the model, if we're thinking like, oh, like the circumstances, I need to make 15K this month, and we have a thought like, man, I got to hustle and hurry up and do this. I got to work hard to get it. Right. Well, what emotions does that create? That creates that urgency, that graspiness, right? Which then creates working harder type activities, which creates the result of basically more lack. So then we just double down because most of us are pretty driven as entrepreneurs and we'll just double down on that shit, right? Versus if we can come to a very like high level thinking where we're thinking in our prefrontal cortex, right? Which is all about problem solving, and it's about seeking solutions, and it's about planning and creativity, then we can really choose strategic actions that move the needle forward and move out of that graspy, hustling type energy that right that's driving the to-do list of 75 things, and we start taking a lot more strategic action, so then we don't have to work as hard and our nervous system is not dysregulated at that point. Does that answer your question,
Oh,
Christina?
yes, most definitely, because of course then that's where the stress comes.
Yep.
And then the 12-hour work days. And
Yep.
it just piles on and on and on for sure.
It
Yeah.
does, and without success, and it's very discouraging for an entrepreneur to be putting in so much effort. And it's like it's growth mindset out of control, right? Because
Mhm.
growth mindset is, as long as I do the work, I'll
Yeah.
meet my goals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it's a, I mean, you can't live in that space. And I think if you allow yourself to just dive in and be in that only, it's like gets out of control. And now I've got to work to get it. Right.
Yeah, yeah, and
And
I tend to be fairly direct and hard, like, out of, like, love and compassion, and it's like, that's not even a growth mindset anyways, right? What it is, it's a it's a shortcut that makes you feel like it's growth mindset, like, that hurt just keep working and, like, put it as long as I work hard, I'll get what I want. It's not how it works, right? Like, we go back to the model. The thought creates the result in your life. So, you cannot okay, I'll use an exercise example. You can go to the gym every single day and eat McDonald's for lunch and Brahms for dinner, and you're never going to have the body you want because you cannot outwork a bad diet.
yes,
You cannot out hustle an unbelieving mindset. So as long as you believe that I'm not going to be successful or I can't have what I want, and like even though it may not be overt, it's kind of a little bit lying underneath, you're never going to out hustle that, because that's always the thought that's driving the results. You can create the results, some results that you want, but it's going to come at a high cost.
it reminds me of that, marketing concept of the big print giveth, the small print taketh away. And it's like that small print is that
Yep.
back of your mind. So, back when I mean, I've been on my spiritual journey for a long time. I started meditating 13 years ago, but on that, I lost my train of thought.
Meditating on the
Don't you see this? Our ADHD
yeah,
together.
that one like woo. Where were you?
Oh,
It's like
well.
out hustling that mindset, like not
Yes.
that lack of belief, out hustling that belief.
Yes.
It's not growth mindset. Growth mindset is I go and I work on my beliefs and my mindset, which the overflow of that creates the actions to get what I want.
It definitely does. And I try to really focus on, I have to pare down, right? I can get an amazing amount of things done in a short amount of time, but I have to pare those down. I can't, right now, my admin is, you can see Christina cracking her whip at me because admin is like the least thing I want to do. I'm creative, but I have to pare down that busy work, and I'll look at my stuff and think, okay, what do I really have to do? What do I really have to do it, to get everything finished, or to, finish this campaign or whatever it is I'm working on? Otherwise, I can get that way as well. You can add in a bunch of stuff that, oh, it'd be nice if I did this. And yeah.
Yeah. And you would be it surprises me every day. Speaking of something I did, it probably took me about 30-45 minutes this morning that I have been putting off for about 4 months
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
because I just thought it was going to be so much more stress and so much. I just felt like so it's that also your what inner beliefs
Yep.
took me to not doing it. Like,
I think it's functional freeze. It
mhm,
is for me.
mhm.
Coming from growing up without money and that scarcity mindset still, like I don't want to sit down and do admin. I don't want to do bookkeeping. I don't want to. And it gets me. I have like I can't do it feeling about it. I think it is kind of a form of scarcity mindset that it and once you do it, it's not that big of a deal. I want to have the Steve Harvey way of thinking about it. When you're going through hell, don't stop.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah.
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 Hmm.
Yeah, and we have to like go back to like with Christina's example, right? Like she has this task. She's like, "Oh, this is going to take forever. I don't want to do it," right? And so, of course, procrastination is going to be the behavior, right? We
Hmm.
go back to the primal brain. Remember the motivational triad: seek pleasure, avoid pain and suffering, mental or physical, and utilize as little energy as possible. So, of course, it's like, yeah, this is going to take a lot of work. This is going to take time or effort. So that primal brain is like, yeah, we're out on that. Right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't wanna do that. That sounds awful and terrible, and we want to do what we wanna do, right? We wanna sit on the couch, or we wanna watch Netflix, or we wanna scroll, or we wanna eat, or we wanna have
Vote.
sex, right? Like, all the things that feel pleasurable to us. So, of course, that part of our brain is, like, saying, "Nope, that we don't wanna do that."
And it's definitely hard. So this season, because we only have one more episode, so you're at the close of this season, and it's all becoming unstoppable. What
Mhm.
would you, in your line of work, what were some tips that you could give our audience about becoming unstoppable, especially going into the holidays and into the new year?
Yeah, the biggest I love biohacking, obviously, so we do a lot of biohacking in my coaching program. Um, I think the biggest hack to become unstoppable is a regulated nervous system, right? And most of us do live in that survival mode, which is your sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, chronically. So it's learning how, and that could be so simple to like start regulating a nervous system. That could be humming. Humming stimulates the vagus nerve, right? Or doing cold exposure, like cold at the end of your shower, cold plunges. They even make devices now that stimulate the vagus nerve. So if we could get our nervous system kind of more into that calmer parasympathetic state, it gives you more time to have more access to that higher level thinking of your brain.
And
And
you
then
don't have all of those emotions and all of those out of control thoughts. It helped me so much when I started meditating. And just like anything else, I plateaued and I had to add different things. Just meditating didn't get me out of functional freeze. My counselor gave me grounding exercises
mhm,
that snapped me right out of it. And so I can usually tell the difference between just procrastinating because I don't want to do it and
right.
being stuck. So that's really
Yeah.
good advice. Thank you.
Yeah, we're a multidimensional animal, right?
Hmm.
So it's always gonna we're very complex. It always takes multi different modal tools, right? Like we just don't there's not one tool that's gonna fix everything for us. We have to have like this kind of more holistic approach because we are this complicated being. But I've noticed like, dealing with PTSD, working with veterans, like so many times we go to top down approaches,
Hmm.
right? Like thought work. I love thought work. I built my whole career right now on thought work, right? But a lot of us, because of just living in this society we do, where there's stress, post pandemic, there's stress. There's still some of us, like myself, that are dealing with long COVID, right? And just starting from the body, they call that bottom up. Starting from the body and supporting the body to then have more access to the brain. And so I think that to become unstoppable, it's just easier to start from the body up approach.
I definitely had to
Yes.
get healthy first. I had lost a significant amount of weight. I was really thin and I had to start taking care of myself again before. It's like I had to make my vessel healthy so that I could even hold the goodness that was there for me. I
Yeah.
just wasn't in it coming from a position where I could.
Well, my husband, had severe PTSD.
Mhm.
And one of the things that from the outside looking in, two things that I think when he started working on all of his traumas for himself, but to the theta wellness,
Mhm.
doing the theta because it was able to redo that. And it's just crazy how that mind and body, because he was already working on himself, to be
Mhm.
able to put that together, I
Yeah.
think it made a huge difference, because I will say I am married to a new man. Like,
Yeah, for
I,
sure.
because the old man, I don't want anymore. I want
Yeah, yeah.
nothing. Seriously. I mean, we would be divorced right now if he was still the old man.
And when we had Beth on the show earlier in the season, she talked about how your muscles and the movement control your hormones, and how important it is. Physicality is important for healthiness and well-being and emotional well-being, because your hormones have such a role in that too.
Definitely.
Yeah, we have a ton of receptors in our hippocampus, right, in our brain for estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, right? So estrogen has a relationship with dopamine. And like if we think about this, like if I'm doing a body up approach where I'm moving out of chronic stress, so my body is not constantly dumping cortisol and norepinephrine, epinephrine, right? And I can get out of that and move into where my body is perceiving, at least for a moment in time during my day, that it is safe, right? We're not going to go there all day. That's not, it's fine. We can come in and out of stress, but most of us aren't coming out of it. But if I can come in and out of it, it allows my body access then to like start rebuilding stores of serotonin. 90% of my serotonin is built in my gut, right? Well, serotonin is a self-confidence chemical and the rejection resilience chemical. And if I don't have adequate levels of that, those emotions and mindset states are really hard to access. And kind of to also take a turn on like this chronic stress state, progesterone is a precursor to making cortisol. Well, progesterone is also the precursor to our sex hormones. It converts down into testosterone and our three estrogens. If we're constantly demanding the body to make cortisol, it's going to downregulate its production to the sex hormones. Now we have less estrogen, right? Again, I'm going to go back. Estrogen has a relationship with dopamine, which is the motivation chemical. So it's like going to the body and healing it, not just with exercise, but with food and gut health, like healing the gut health, right? And putting it in a calm state, whether that's meditation or hydrotherapy, cold exposure, tapping, Tai Chi.
Those are all such fantastic tips, and
Yes.
I wish we could just go on and on,
I know.
but we can't.
Y'all two are nerds. We'll be here all
I
day.
know.
I don't mean it in a bad way, but it's one of these. I'm like, okay, well, I know Kim, but I'll just step away for a little while.
Talk about the sciencey stuff. Well, tell us if someone's interested in your coaching services and listening to your podcast, how can they find out more about you?
Yeah, they should just go first. I have a freebie. It's the mindset to reach your full potential, how to develop that. It's a free masterclass they can access on any of my platforms, IG at Kimberly Jarman Coaching, TikTok at Kimberly Jarman, or my website, KimberlyJarmanCoaching.com. And then my podcast is with Dr. Carmen Jones, licensed naturopathic doctor. She's brilliant. She went to conventional med school and did another 4 years in naturopathic med school, and that's Thrive and Aligned Healing. So yeah, check out the masterclass first. That's a great way to get to know my personality and like I am who I am and whether we even jive together.
Fantastic. And we will have a link to Kimberly's website and podcast in our show notes. And please listen, subscribe, download, share with your friends. You can also find links to Christina's business, The Declutter Queen, and my business, Hexagon Media, in our show notes. And until next week, the last episode of season 2,
We are out.